Tonight, Ontario sending a message to its hospitals.
But this is going to be really quite an unprecedented effort to do some what they call load sharing.
Hospitals being told to take immediate action as a record number of COVID patients continue to take over beds, what the province is ordering. Plus,
I'm frustrated because I think they could have done things way back in the spring or the summer that they didn't do.
Kids won't be returning to class just yet. Ontario is delaying the return of in-person learning for elementary students. We'll tell you why and what parents and teachers have to say. And
all Trump's doing is showing himself to be a petulant child.
You can't control everybody. They might like you, they might follow you, but you can't control their actions.
Perspectives from both sides of the border after the chaos on Capitol Hill and as pressure mounts to remove Trump from office, even with less than 2 weeks to go before Biden's inauguration. Good evening, I'm Kelda Yoon. Ontario is marking the deadliest day of the pandemic so far, along with another record number of new COVID-19 infections. The province reported 89 deaths from the virus today. That's a record. It also recorded 3,519 new cases, the most ever in a single day. COVID-19 patients in hospitals and in intensive care also reached new highs at 1,472 and 363, respectively. With growing concerns over hospitals being overwhelmed by COVID patients, we have details tonight on new orders being sent out to hospitals across the province. Queen's Park reporter Mike Crawley has the details.
So the province is telling hospitals across Ontario to be ready for large transfers of patients from overcrowded hospitals to ones that have a little bit more room. And we're talking dozens of patients at a time potentially, and eventually hundreds of patients. And the transfers wouldn't just necessarily be happening within regions, that there might actually be potential for patients to be transferred across regional borders. Now, the situation is basically that Ontario is seeing more COVID-19 patients than it has seen before, and that the forecast is to see even more in the coming weeks. In this memo that I've obtained, it comes from the CEO of Ontario Health, Matthew Anderson. It says that hospitals are expecting that they will see 1,700 patients with COVID-19 by January 24th, and by that same date, 500 patients with COVID-19 in the ICUs. To put that in context, that is double the number of intensive care patients with COVID-19 that the province saw at the peak of the first wave of the pandemic, and it would effectively mean that 1 out of every 4 intensive care beds in Ontario would be occupied by a patient with COVID-19.
This is going to be really quite an unprecedented effort to do some what they call load sharing to help some of the hospitals that have been really disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, and use some of the hospitals who have been not quite as disadvantaged and are in areas where there's less COVID-19 prevalence, or where their hospitals have some capacity, in order to even things out a little bit.
Now, Dr. Chris Simpson of Ontario Health also told me that hospitals in the Toronto area are on the brink, and those would be some of the first ones to be transferring patients potentially out of the region. The province has a system to coordinate the demand on intensive care patients. However, Dr. Simpson said that the cooperation that's going to be needed between hospitals is at a level that has never been seen before in Ontario. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
Tens of thousands of elementary students won't be returning to class next week as originally planned. The province says COVID-19 infections among children exploded over the holiday break, so officials have decided to delay the return to in-person learning. Chris Glover has more.
I'm depressed. I'm angry. I'm enraged. I just think this is just the most ridiculous decision.
Bronwyn Alsop just found out elementary students like her 2 kids will not go back to the classroom for at least 2 weeks.
They've been flip-flopping a lot. So the fear of it and the lack of trust, it's been eating away at me. I haven't been able to sleep.
Originally, the plan was to return Monday, but elementary students in the Windsor area have known since this morning it wasn't happening there.
We'll move forward with the issuance of an order if needed. So bottom line is, from Monday, whether the province do it or whether I do it, it will be an online learning model for our community.
Things are so dire at some GTA hospitals. Starting today, new pediatric patients will now be transferred to sick kids.
Opening schools right now would be like throwing gasoline on a fire that's already out of control.
Number one priority is not to put our kids in jeopardy, and I will never do that, especially at the rates we're seeing.
The premier says prior to the winter break, 3% of children 13 and under tested for COVID-19 tested positive. Now 20%, or 1 in 5.
And it just goes to show you the education plan that Minister Lecce put out there was working. As soon as we went through Christmas, everyone got together.
And yet, despite that solid education plan, Ford left it to Ontario's chief medical officer to break the news.
And I know this is a tough one.
With case counts anticipated to top 4,000 a day, Dr. David Williams says the in-class closure could be even longer.
So that's why we're deferring in-class attendance, not closing schools, for another 2 weeks in Southern Ontario so we can get these other things in place.
He especially noted enhancing testing and COVID surveillance at schools. As if to highlight how divided everybody is, I spent the day reaching out to medical officers of health, and the one in Durham Region said that he supported keeping things virtual for now, but York Region's medical officer of health said that very little transmission had been linked to schools, and he would have preferred kids to get back to the classroom on Monday, but we know from Dr. David Williams that that will not be happening, and he said that things will be reassessed after the 2 weeks, and kids could be out of in-classroom learning for even longer. Chris Glover, CBC News, Toronto.
We heard from one frustrated parent in that report, and she's not alone. This latest announcement has many parents scrambling to figure out alternative plans. Dahlia Ashry has more reaction.
Jackie Scott is the mother of a 12-year-old boy. She says the news has her feeling defeated.
I'm really tired fighting just to exist. I don't want to live like this.
Her son Connor has autism. He also suffers from mental health issues.
Zoom learning on a child with autism on a screen for 8 hours a day, it doesn't work.
Scott is currently looking for work while struggling to care for her son while he learns at home.
He needs one-on-one support. So if you continuously to do this, we're in year 8, you're losing the opportunity for my son to have a good standard of education. And you're taking away my ability to earn.
Jessica Lyons from Ontario Parent Action Network says the government should have taken action sooner so parents wouldn't have to scramble.
When you have a government that has abandoned Ontarians and left us with no plan, that's when it becomes easy to turn against each other and say, well, I need school, well, we need hospital capacity, but it's really not about that.
But the mother of 3 believes, for now, virtual learning is the safest option.
We're all doing things for a greater purpose, which is to prevent illness and death.
Laura McCoy is a grade 7 teacher at Winona Drive Senior Public School. She, too, is disappointed with how the government has been handling the situation.
I'm frustrated because I think they could have done things way back in the spring or the summer that they didn't do.
While the signs at Winona Drive Senior Public School reads, "Stop, do not enter," McCoy hopes to enter her classroom as soon as possible.
I definitely prefer teaching in person. I think that's good for the kids. I think it's good for education, but I don't want to be in an unsafe situation, and I don't want the kids to be in an unsafe situation as well.
Dahlia Ashry, CBC News, Toronto.
And as we told you earlier, Ontario is reporting a record number of new COVID cases and a record number of deaths today. This led one healthcare union to rally outside a hard-hit long-term care home this afternoon. Lorenda Redekop was there.
Outside this long-term care home today, a rally to support workers and demand more. And as it happened, a reminder of the seriousness inside the home. 156 residents have tested positive, 10 of them have died, and dozens of staff have the virus.
Everyone is living in fear. There's high anxiety. They don't know if they're going to contract the deadly virus. They don't know if they're going to give it to their kids at home.
We have heard stories from staff that talk about chronic understaffing and conditions that just aren't safe enough. And they are too scared to speak because they are worried their employer will fire them if they do.
They want the government to improve conditions at homes, including more staff and better pay.
Today at another home, Tender Care in Scarborough, a record.
73 residents there have died. That's more than any other home in the province. 98-year-old Waylo Lynn is one of them. Her family was told she had the virus but was asymptomatic. Then a week later that she wasn't eating. She died the next day.
They didn't want to tell anybody like what was happening behind those doors, which I feel like is what led to and is still the cause of the 70 plus deaths.
A hospital has taken over at that home.
It's always a reactive approach when the house is on fire. So not unlike Sunnycrest, Tender Care, St. George, it's after there's 100 plus cases that help is sent in and it's too late at this point. I think at this point we have to get the military back in.
The Ministry of Long-Term Care says it was different when the military was sent in. Staffing was close to collapse, while at Tender Care, staffing is now above normal levels. Doris Way talks with other families and says something more is needed from homes and the government to keep other families from going through what hers did. Lorenda Redikoff, CBC News, Toronto.
South of the border, U.S. President Donald Trump has finally conceded the 2020 election to President-elect Joe Biden. In a new video, Trump also condemns his violent supporters who stormed the Capitol building yesterday.
The demonstrators who infiltrated the Capitol have defiled the seat of American democracy. To those who engaged in the acts of violence and destruction, you do not represent our country. And to those who broke the law, you will pay.
Trump, however, did not address his role in inciting the violence. Meanwhile, there are growing calls for Vice President Mike Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment and remove Trump from office. Nancy Pelosi saying if that doesn't happen, they will attempt to have him impeached. Yesterday's violence left 4 rioters dead and a number of police officers injured. So far, 90 people have been arrested. And tonight, the chief of the U.S. Capitol Police has resigned amid criticism over an apparent lack of preparedness to deal with the violent mob. The events in the States have been the talk of our city. Here's how some of you are feeling.
All Trump's doing is showing himself to be a petulant child who doesn't like to be told no.
It goes against the fundamental principles that the U.S. represents, not just for its country itself, but for the rest of the world. Right now we should be fighting this virus. We shouldn't be fighting each other.
It threatens all of us together. I think the root of all of this is the concentration of wealth.
And we've also been following the developments in the U.S. through the eyes of a number of people who call America home. From November's election to yesterday's violence in Washington, they've been watching every twist and turn closely. Greg Ross has their perspectives again tonight.
While these were the partisan actions of frustrated Trump supporters yesterday, the condemnation of this riot at the U.S. Capitol was bipartisan amongst the voters we spoke to today.
That's pretty extreme what they did.
Kind of ridiculous that happened and they don't have a better security there. It's kind of embarrassing.
It was a sad moment for me, for our country, that we would behave that way.
Debbie Schumacher, who owns a bed and breakfast in Toronto, Kansas, voted for Donald Trump in the November 3rd election, but she simply cannot get behind what a group of fellow Trump supporters did in Washington yesterday.
There's just not a reason for us to ever go into that kind of action. If we don't get our way, to have a tantrum, and that's kind of where I felt like it was yesterday.
And we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
Many say Trump bears responsibility for the violence yesterday for seemingly egging his supporters on at this rally.
Do you think that it's fair to put blame on the president and his people for what happened yesterday?
People have a choice, always have a choice in life, and they have a choice in their decisions.
You can't control everybody.
John Hubbard of Toronto, Ohio, also voted for Trump, and while he still thinks he made the right decision, he isn't buying into conspiracy theories made by the president about a rigged election.
Do you think that the election was fraudulent, or do you think that it was a fair election?
I think it was a fair election.
Both Hubbard and Schumacher say they will support Joe Biden as the next president of the United States.
I'm really hopeful to get back to sane government.
Jay Sandys is from Toronto, Canada, but he now lives in New Jersey. He voted for Biden.
I don't think he's going to be perfect, but I think he's accountable. I think, he plays by the rules. There are rules with him, whereas with Trump, there really were none.
If there's one thing all of these voters seem to agree on, is that there's a deep divide amongst Americans, and it needs to change.
My prayer is that our country comes into unity, and that we quit being a right or left side, and that we come into unity as America.
Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
After the break, paramedics started getting their COVID-19 vaccines today. We'll speak to some of the frontline heroes about what it's like to finally get that shot in the arm. Plus,
clearer skies during the day mean the sunshine. I'm meteorologist Colette Kennedy, but it means at night, cooler temperatures. I'll have your forecast coming up after the break.
welcome back. Taking a look at Ontario's vaccination effort now. Yesterday, more than 12,000 doses of the COVID-19 vaccine were administered. That brings the total number of doses to 72,631. And so far, more than 2,100 people have received both doses, completing their vaccination. Frontline workers have been the first to receive the shots, with doctors, nurses, PSWs, and now, as we just saw, paramedics rolling up their sleeves. And as Ali Chiasson reports, in some cases, paramedics are also administering the shots.
V-Day is here for Toronto and GTA paramedics.
It was an amazing day. So it felt really good to get the vaccine.
Toronto EMS workers will be rolling up their sleeves getting the first dose of the Pfizer vaccine at one of 3 hospital locations across the city. Each site will vaccinate 50 paramedics a day.
My colleagues and I have been working under, stressful conditions, and my hope is that this will lower the stress a little bit. I personally go back home to a young daughter, so I know that this makes me feel really good that I'm protecting her as well.
It's happening in Peel Region 2. Halton paramedics started receiving vaccines last week.
We're all very excited about the vaccine news. It's really the beacon of hope for us.
Frontline workers have been the first to receive the vaccines, and you don't get much more frontline than a paramedic.
They don't have the kind of setup that we are able to have in the hospital, where we're able to put patient in a specific room. We know that room has been cleaned. But the paramedics, they have to go and attend sometimes quite quickly to the patient, whether that environment is on the street, in their house.
They've got the training, the PPE. The paramedics we spoke with today felt the vaccine was the missing piece.
The overarching feeling is just feeling grateful that something has come along to help us and that I can protect other people. I think that's my biggest fear is hurting somebody else, and the fact that I have the vaccine, it just makes me feel so much better and so much more relieved.
You feel a little bit like you've got a new superpower. You're just slightly more protected than you were before on vaccine number 1, and then vaccine number 2, or 3 weeks later, I think that feeling will be even better. It's really important to know that the people who we need to be there to take care of us when we're sick are getting vaccinated, so that the next time somebody calls 911, you know that paramedic will be available and healthy to come and see you and take care of you. That's really important.
Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
You're looking at a shot of the Toronto skyline. It's a cool night with mainly clear skies remaining mostly clear overnight. Let's go to our meteorologist Colette Kennedy now. And Colette, nice to see more of that sunshine today.
Thanks, Kelda. You know, I saw something today that I haven't seen in a while. Yes, the sun was out. That happened for many of us. But I mean, I mentioned this on radio earlier, that as the sun was setting, it was just lighting up the west side of the CN Tower in this lovely bath of an orange glow, and it was absolutely beautiful. It's been a few days, hasn't it? So nice to have the clearer conditions. The only thing is that blanket of cloud, it is just like a blanket. It kind of keeps some of the daytime heating in. So now as we lose it, it means we'll see some cooler nights, and our temperatures falling back closer to seasonal. So much cooler tonight, just cooler compared to where it's been. Not that it's really that far off seasonal, right? More sun for Friday, and this quiet weather pattern. Yes, we're not looking at any stormy conditions as I look through not just the weekend, but well into mid next week. Things are looking good too. And something else I want to point out is that for this first week of this new year of 2021 and this young month of January, every single day, see my legend up here, above average, not just our daytime highs, but our overnight lows have been above average as well. Now, tomorrow, if I were to color this in, it's probably going to be going closer to that green as we see that cooler air starting to come our way. Daytime temperatures, 8 a.m., -3, but 0 at St. Catharines because there was the extra cloud cover there in place. And then through the day, these are a look at our highs as we were pushing, or at least as we were pushing towards 3, where the temperatures were sitting. So it took a little bit time and a little more of a struggle today to see things warming up. Those clouds, the ones that have been so stubborn, finally eroding there, and by midday they should be eroding back in extreme southwestern Ontario too towards Windsor. So earlier Chatham, Kent, Leamington, you'll clear out, and then eventually Windsor as well, getting more sun. There were a few peaks at it today, and then looking good as we go into Saturday. The temperatures tonight, -3 for Windsor, feeling like -8, much cooler over towards London at -10 because of the clearer skies. And then tomorrow, still looking okay, kind of mild. Tomorrow night for Windsor, you'll see the cooler air move in. You'll feel it tonight, Markham -11, Toronto -8, feeling like -14 to -15, and then the daytime highs tomorrow. Notice anything? Yeah, there's a negative in front of every single one of them, not really climbing above the freezing mark. A look into the weekend, though, shows you that the temperatures, they come back up again, and also shows you what's going on with that weather pattern and just how quiet it is going to be as we carry on through the next several days, Kelda.
Thanks so much, Colette.
The weather is brought to you by Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. We test
so it runs. It's hard to stop a train.
It's game on for the Toronto Maple Leafs. The team can officially play on home ice. The province has given the sign-off to allow both the Leafs and the Ottawa Senators to play in their home arenas this season. No fans will be allowed. All Canadian teams will only play against each other in their own division. A Minister of Sport, Lisa MacLeod, says the decision to allow the teams to play in Ontario was made in consultation with the officers of health from both cities. The Leafs will host Montreal next Wednesday for their season opener. Okay, before we go, here's a little palate cleanser for you. The Toronto Zoo releasing new video of one of its newest residents. This is 5-month-old Poe. The baby zebra is now standing 5 feet tall and looking a little playful, as you can see. The zoo says he is also quite a handful for his mom, Tori, something a lot of moms out there probably can relate to. So cute. And that is our show for you tonight. Thank you so much for watching. Dwight Drummond has your next local newscast tomorrow at 6, and I will see you back here tomorrow night at 11. Have a great night, everyone.